as you can see, this was a huge store. This is a massive store. And so just to give a little context, so some of the words, I'm not sure if everyone knows. They're not commonly used all the time. So haberdashery was the making of hats. Costumes were ladies' dresses and things like that. Mantles were like wraps that you would wear around your shoulders. What else do we have? Millinery was also hats, like big fancy hats with like feathers and flowers and things like that. So yeah, this would have been just a spectacular store to go and check out back in the day. So the firm actually expanded. So like they did so well that he decided to build another building. He moved to Burke Street, and when he did that, he basically was like, what am I going to do with my old store? He didn't have the I guess, drive to have two. He finally had made it all the way from Wales as a poor kid, and it was living it up on Burke Street, which was like the shopping mecca of all of Melbourne, right? So actually then in 1941, the army actually took over this building and used it as storage because obviously the war effort and everything going on. 1941 is also the year that David Lewis died. So after he died, the business kind of went downhill. It got bought out by Maples. They wanted to get into more of a department store business and everything. So a little bit about David Lewis. So he, being a person who grew up very poor and not a whole lot of means, he became interested in the work of the Presentation Sisters for the education of girls, and he was a financial supporter of their convent in Windsor for a number of years. In 1928, he donated £2,000 to the engineering school of the University of Melbourne for laboratory extensions and things like that. So he was very much into making sure young people had education, which was really great. In his will, when he died in 1941, he established the David Lewis Trust with a £700,000 endowment. Massive for the time. That would be millions of pounds today, to provide scholarships for full-time degree courses at the University of Melbourne for boys from Victorian state schools whose parents could not afford a university education for them. So that's huge, that's massive. I think the only exception, there were a couple of exceptions, arts being one of them, so, but yeah, he was looking to make sure that, people from the poorer areas of Melbourne, which in that time there were quite a few, had a chance, which was amazing. An article in 1941 wrote this that I thought was really interesting as well. So, David Edward Lewis, who died recently and left his £700,000 estate for the education of Australian youth, are all too rare. For too long, the tendency in Australia among the wealthy has been to take every advantage of the academic prestige of our great seat of learning and to offer nothing in return. The terms of Mr. Lewis's will enable Melbourne University to become the mentor of all that is talented in Victorian schoolboys whose parents, on the £6 a week line, obviously are not in a position to develop the genius of their sons. So, look, even back then, people were saying that the rich pay their fair share. So it's pretty nice, I think, that David Lewis left that to everyone. As I said, the building was taken over by Maple's department store. It housed a bunch of other different businesses throughout the years. So one of them, Edmund's Jewelry, some of you might remember that. You can still see some ghost signs for it around. It was a garment manufacturer, and it was the home of dinkum pies for a while. So, today it is an apartment complex, which I would love to see what it looks like. I'm sure it probably doesn't look like it used to, but the other thing that I really love is it does have this giant mural by an artist. His name is Flem. When he created this, I think back in 2016 or so, it's an augmented reality thing. So basically you point your camera at it and it does some animation and stuff. So yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, and that's the other thing is, I really got into taking photos of Melbourne through street art as well. So we just live in such a culturally rich place that it just kind of all starts to overlap a bit. But that is the story of love The next one I'm going to go to is another business, but a much smaller scale here in Prahran. So, I'm not sure if anyone has seen this, but this is a beautiful little former cash grocer in the back streets of Prahran. So what this reads is, you probably can't read what it says, but it reads, R. Giles and Son, Cash Grocer, McAlpin's Maltopepsin Self-Raising Flour. Alright, so a bit about this one. This was constructed around 1885 for a different grocer. His name was James Howard, who ran the business. Him and his wife ran the business. It's in the back street, so it would have been like your little local go-to, almost like a milk bar. So it would have been the grocery that you would just be able to walk to. And these were dotted all throughout Melbourne and its suburbs. So a lot of times I will walk around and you can instantly recognize, oh, well, that house, that used to be some kind of business. Maybe it was a grocer, maybe it was a butcher, maybe it was a fish and chip shop, because they didn't used to always be along shopping centers. They used to be just embedded within the community, which is super nice. Unfortunately, in 1896, at the age of 38, James died suddenly, so very sad. Only 38. But his wife took over. She did a good job. She worked there for quite a while, actually, until 1905. 1905 is when Richard Giles and his son began to run the grocery. So you can imagine Richard is excited. He's got his own grocery store. Gets to write his name up there, and there it is. You know, from 1900. This sign is from 1905, so it still survived to some extent, which is really impressive. It's also really nice and impressive that the people that own the building, you can see, obviously it's been remodeled. The front is pretty modern looking and everything, but they were, they kept that beautiful brick and that beautiful sign work that someone worked on. The artistry, if you think about it, the artistry of the typography and everything is just really incredible. It's really amazing. So, let me say first, so McAlpin's at that time, they were fairly new to the market. They'd been around for a few years. They were based in Abbotsford. By about 1905, they became more of a big, they're in groceries throughout the city. So this would have been a really big deal to be carrying McAlpin's flour. It was brand new. They advertised very heavily in the newspapers to the housewives, of course. They ran contests. They did all sorts of interesting things with that. Giles passed away in 1929 after almost 25 years of running this grocery. And then shortly after that, a few years later, it was taken over by a man named Sidney Marshall. So with a lot of these stories, a lot of it is just me saying, right, what's kind of the story? And there's not always like a really interesting story. Sometimes there is. Usually if it's been in the newspaper, there's been a murder or death or something, because that's, like the news today, that's what they like to talk about. But in one night in 1933, Mr. Marshall, he's asleep, he lives in the back, him and his wife, they live in the back of the shop, and he woken up, there's buzzing noise going on. What is that? It's like 4:30 in the morning. So he walks outside, opens his door, and there's a man just casually standing there, 4:45 in the morning, like as you do. So he looks at the man and he's like, what's going on here? And the man, kind of looks around and he's like, I was just walking and I was down the street and I just was resting up against the door and I kind of fell up against it. And then, Marshall's like, you just kind of fell up against it. And he looks down. The man is holding a crowbar and he looks at his door. His door is obviously been messed with, and he looks back at the man. The man just takes off running. And then just right around the corner, there's a Pontiac waiting for him. It's still running. His buddy's in there. They get in. Marshall runs down the street in his pajamas, yelling at the man. Someone calls the cops. Those people are never found, but it's just kind of the story. So that's the kind of thing that you would have to deal with, as a grocer. You worked at the grocery, you lived at the grocery, you were woken up and someone kind of tried to bust in and to steal your Maltopepsin flour, so very hard. So Marshall actually ran the shop for like 40 years, which is pretty impressive. Yes. So about McAlpin's, that's kind of the story of the shop. So yeah, it was a grocery for a long time, up until like the 1970s. The 1970s actually became the headquarters of I think it was someone who like just went out and repossessed cars. So yeah. that was the 1970s, early 1970s, and here it is, however many, 50 years later, that sign's still there. So it's just really impressive. Then I started thinking, McAlpin's Flower. So I actually see quite a few ghost signs around for McAlpin's Flower. But I was also like, what's the story of McAlpin's Flower? Okay, so here we go. I'll tell you. Let's find out. All right. So John McAlpin, he founded McAlpin's Flower in the 1960s, late 1960s, early 1970s. In 1883 is when he really started to expand his business in Abbotsford, up into the 1920s. And they actually became Melbourne's best-known supplier of self-raising flour. And there was a lot of different brands around at the time. There was Rego, which pops up in ghost signs every once in a while. There were, King's Crown brand flour, which was a self-raising flour. So we had a lot of competition and everything, but McAlpin's was basically the best. So the McAlpin family ran it until about 1959. They still, next one here, so Tintara. So this is going to kind of lead into our next two. So this, again, is actually right around the corner from here. A lot of these signs are not too far, from where we are right now. So you could come and get your ales, stouts, wines, spirits, tobacco, cigarettes, liqueurs, cocktails, etc. from this shop and buy single bottles at city prices from proprietor Timothy James Murphy. So Timothy Murphy, he ran this shop from 1935 to 1971, because when he died. This row of shops itself was built in 1885. It had a lot of different people that occupied it for quite a long time. There was a woman named Madame Dora Beazle. So she was there. She was actually creating dresses for a number of years for the fashionable women at the turn of the century here in Prahran. Pretty cool. Thomas J. Crook was a grocer. So he started off with having one little shop and expanded around some of the suburbs. So he was someone who had a franchise of grocery stores back in around 1900. Pretty interesting. If any of you have heard of Moran and Cato, they have a lot of big signs and buildings still around, especially around Fitzroy. He was kind of a rival of theirs, but he did last, because you don't see anything for Thomas J. Crook's grocery anywhere. So there you go. In 1915, everyone that I just talked about, they were all gone. The building was the home to a leather merchant who supplied super sole leather, absolutely waterproof, weighs twice as long as ordinary leather. There's a lot of leather merchants around, so that was really great. But it wasn't until 1924 that this building that has all these beautiful signs became a liquor store, or a bottle of, for those of you who don't know what that is. The man who ran it, Jack Downey, he had run the Victoria Hotel up in Shepparton, so if any of you have ever been up there, that's where he was from. And over the next decade, just kind of handed over and over and over to a bunch of different people running liquor stores and everything. And in 1935 is when T.J. Murphy took it over. So T.J. Murphy, the name Murphy and liquor should actually be pretty familiar to a lot of you. So his son, Daniel Francis Murphy, of Dan Murphy fame, yep. He got his first metaphorical taste of wine and spirits industry in this in these walls right here. So, and then he opened his first shop down the streets at the Prahran Arcade in 1952, which we will get to shortly. TJ died in 1966, but his shop continued for another few years. I'm not sure if Dan continued the shop. It continued under the name Murphy, so I assume he did. So with these signs, you can see there's a few. The Tintara sign, which is still looking pretty good. It was, and these two signs, super hard to read. I don't know if anyone can. Yeah, of course, yeah, the Foster's Lager. Yeah, stouts. I'm not sure which stout. There were hundreds of different independent breweries and things around, but yeah, Foster's Lager. Yes, you guys got that right away. Nice. took me a minute, but my eyes are as trained. Foster's. I'm not a native Australian, my heart. I love Australia. So then, aside from that, I think we all know about Foster's. From the Carlton Brewery and everything. They came from that, so I won't go through that. But Tintara, for me, I'm not sure. I didn't know about Tintara. So just real quick, so it's a wine label. It was produced outside of Adelaide in the McLaren Valley. First established in 1861, so it's been around for quite a while, by a doctor, Dr. Alexander Kelly. Basically any kind of wine back then in the 1850s, 60s was produced by doctors or people in the medical trade. They used wine and spirits for a number of ailments. I still do this as well, so I understand. And then a man named Thomas Hardy in 1877 took this over, and that's part of the same, the Hardy Wine Companies who owns Tintara today. So, yeah, it's been around for a long time, 145 years or so. And that actually leads us right into the next one. So, yes, that was T.J. Murphy's. I think I can't really say for sure if these are T.J. Murphy signs or one of the signs from before him, but because they're still up and around and he ran it so long, I'm pretty sure these were probably painted by or for Mr. Murphy. Pretty cool. And I was walking around today and I saw this again and I was like, it's still there. I like to check in on the signs too. I don't know, like I find a sign every once in a while in the neighborhood. I'm like, I'm just gonna go check on the sign, make sure no one's demolished the buildings that happens, make sure no one's graffitied over it that happens. That's another reason that I do this, is I think that it's really important to not only capture the signs, and my photography. These photos of the Tintara signs were probably taken about a year and a half ago. I think my photography is improved by then, so sometimes I'll revisit to take better pictures. But for me, a lot of it is trying to capture these things because they're so ephemeral. They don't last forever. Even if they've been around for 100, 120, 150 years, they still have a shelf life. Eventually, they're going to fade to oblivion, or they'll be demolished, or someone is going to paint over them, which happens all the time as well. So I go through and I try to get as many as I can. It's kind of become an obsession, for better or worse. But I do think it's really important. And then I really enjoy writing these stories because you can look at these signs and say, yep, that's a sign, it's got Foster's Lager on it, it's Tintara wine, great. But then you find out, oh, what? Daniel Murphy grew up here. Dan Murphy grew up here. Dan Murphy was a real person. He's not just a corporate mascot. So, for me, it's always about learning. So I think that's really important. So the next one we're going to look at is the Prahran Arcade. The beautiful Prahran Arcade. It looks so nice tonight. I'm not sure if anyone had drove past it today. The nice wet night like tonight with the lights and everything on. It looks very beautiful. It's just undergone a restoration, which is great. I remember when I first moved here, I used to live in Melbourne for a while, so I would take this route into the city quite a bit. And I remember going past this building and it had just like plants and flowers and things just like spilling out of it. So I thought it was like a greenhouse or something. It was not. I think it was just someone who loved plants. It's great. So let's talk about the Prahran Arcade. You can see it's got the great vintage JB Hi-Fi sign on it. It's almost as striking as the Prahran Arcade sign itself. But the other thing about this building that on the side of it over here, there is a ghost of a ghost sign, and I was actually staring at it tonight. I'm like, what was this? Find out what was this. You can tell everyone at this talk, but I couldn't figure it out. I don't know what it was. I don't know what it said. But yes, so this was designed way back in 1890. So this was kind of a precursor to the big giant emporium stores that have popped up around it. So Love and Lewis is just down the street. We're directly across from the big store that I showed you at the beginning. So this is like kind of a shopping mecca here, but I think this is kind of a big one in terms of like having a big arcade. So an arcade, just in case anyone doesn't know, was basically a building that had a bunch of different kinds of shops and everything. This one had a lot more going on, and I'll get into that. So it was designed by an architect named George McMullen for a woman named Mrs. Elizabeth Delaney. So she owned it. It used to have a bunch of advertisements saying, hey, come, sell your wares at the Prahran Arcade. And it actually had 29 shops on its ground floor. So that's really impressive when you think about it. So if you've been into the JB Hi-Fi, you have to imagine, it was a big long hall and basically a bunch of little stalls. So you would go through and you'd be able to go in there and buy all sorts of different things. Super, super impressive. So The first floor had a number of baths as well, so it had hot, cold, and Turkish baths as well as dressing rooms. The cellar was occupied by a bakehouse and an ice maker, so ice, you didn't have ice was really hard to come by, so having an ice maker here in the middle of Prahran was really, that was great. Wow, you can come get your ice here. The papers of the time hailed it as splendid. It was a big enough deal, had a bunch of articles written about it. People of Prahran were really excited. This was a huge deal when this opened back in 1890. So through its life, it has been basically, the home of tailors, tea packers, fancy goods, music teachers, caterers. It had a club inside of it before. The top floor was a hotel, so it was just a really swinging place back in the day. So in 1952, that's when Dan Murphy opened his wine cellar here. So Dan Murphy is, first of all, it's the largest liquor store chain in all of Australia, and it all began right here. It all began actually at the last one, at Tintara's. And it was here that he had the original Dan Murphy's from 1952 up until the 80s, and that's when he started to expand and started moving around. So he worked for his father Timothy, as I said last time, and as a kid, as a young man, he initially rejected being in the liquor business. And he went into accounting. So, we could have Dan Murphy's chain of accounting firms around, Then he actually trained to be a priest. So, I guess he liked wine enough, but he didn't want to, sell it, but he was really, obviously, did not want to go into the liquor trade. In World War II, he was part of the Royal Australian Air Force, and when he came home, he decided make amends, rejoined his father, and started working at the previous building that I showed you. But he never saw eye to eye with his father. So his father had pretty high prices. He was catering to the rich people of Turak, trying to get them to come in and everything. But Dan thought, no, if you lower prices, you get more sales volume, this kind of stuff. So he basically, had a view of opinion on how to do business. And I don't want to speculate on Dan's relationship with his father, but keep in mind that he literally opened his first business like just around the corner from his dad as a rival business. So I'm not sure what their home life is like, but that says something. So the other thing is Dan Murphy's has recently moved back. I'm not sure if anyone has been there. Over here on the right, this is Dan Murphy's. I didn't get a very good close-up. They had like a bouncer, and that guy did not want me taking photos of him. And I was like, that's fine. So I don't want to get beat up by the Dan Murphy's police. So, but I did go down the stairs and check it out. The cellar is actually really, really impressive. And it has like some really nice windows that look out onto at street level and everything. So if you get a chance, go down there. You have to drink wine if you don't want to, or if you want to. Great for it. There's Dan Murphy himself. There he is with some grapes. So Dan Murphy was actually a huge lover of wine. He began in Australia's or Melbourne's first wine club. So basically, you would sign up, you'd come in, have some wine with Dan, and then started. He actually also jumped on the boxed wine train. So any of you who have played Wheel of Goon, this man here. I never got to play it as a youth, but I hear it's fun. So this is actually inside of the Prahran Arcade. So you go into JB Hi-Fi. Yes, it looks like a JB Hi-Fi store, but you look up. You can still see there's a beautiful stained glass window in the back. These windows are all still there. You can't see it super well, but there's some chandeliers hanging down that are still there. So take a trip to JB Hi-Fi and just look up. They won't mind. Just try not to bump into anyone. So I think that's actually really great. I know we kind of joked at the beginning about JB Hi-Fi sign and everything. That's their branding. That's how it is. But they've done a pretty good job of keeping everything inside and looking pretty nice. So if you kind of imagine, this would have been just a huge bustling area. This would have been the shopping destination back in the day. So there's still quite a few ghost signs on the building itself, which is really nice. So this one I love. The other thing about this is they're kind of hidden behind perspex, so it's basically clear plastic. Ghost signs are not heritage protected. As far as I know, there's three signs in Melbourne, Victoria that are heritage protected. One is the Skipping Girl sign, one is the Pellegrini sign, and the third one is...
Whelan.
Is it?
Whelan Argus?
Yeah. So but that's it. There's like three signs that are heritage protected. So all of these signs, there's nothing to say anyone can't paint over them across all of Melbourne and Victoria and Australia. So again, that's why I take a lot of photos of them. Basically, I could not find out much about Mr. Nelson. He just didn't advertise very much. I think he probably worked for the people in the arcade quite a bit. So a ticket writer, they were a silkscreen printer or a letterpress printer. So they basically made paper goods, little cards and things for price tags, little small signs. They would make business cards. Whenever you'd have a sale, you would make a little tag you would tie a ribbon onto and everything. So that was it. This here, Miss Carol, costumer, number 9 in arcade. Yeah. Her sign's still looking pretty good. This sign is from about 1914. Not looking too bad. Yeah. So again, I don't know a whole lot about her, but she did advertise. So I think actually she worked in, despite saying a costumer, so she was making ladies' garments and things like that. But I think she actually did also work as a costume designer for some local plays and things like that. So I saw some advertisements that said that. I think it was her. I can't confirm it's the same woman, but I do know this was one of the ads that she ran in the paper. She wanted to intimate to her friends and the public generally that she has commenced business as a ladies' tailor and costumer at Union Street, Malvern, 3 doors down from Glen Ferry Road, and trusts for a share of their patronage. Tailor-made costumes, a specialty. So she was around quite a bit, making clothing and things for the women of the area. Super great. And this one as well, Madame Esselmont's dress cutting, Tuesdays, 2:30 p.m. Wednesday to 8 p.m. upstairs. So I do know a bit about her. So I was able to track down quite a bit. And the way I was able to do this was, first of all, I got a tip from someone else who had done some research and found something, and through that I was able to pull some threads and figure out who she was. So she ran a lot of different ads. Again, this sign is probably from around 1914, 15, somewhere around there. So her and Miss Carol probably knew each other, I would imagine. But she would do free dress cutting demonstrations at the Prahran Town Hall. So you could come down there. Ladies, learn to make your own frocks, etc. by a quick, easy American method. No fitting required. So. Yeah, you know, us Americans, you don't need to fit us. You just throw a sack over us. That's how we are. We still look like that. In the Argus, 1918, she had another ad. Dress cutting and improved American system, learned in 6 lessons. Madame Esselmont, Prahran Arcade Building, Tuesday afternoons, Wednesday evenings. So, yeah, she was advertising quite a bit. She was out there hustling and making money. I know she did also have an office or a studio in Brunswick. So yeah, she kind of moved around quite a bit, and I think she just kind of found, wherever she could. Here, I wrote it down. Yeah, she was in Brunswick in the 1920s and 30s. So there you go. Her name was Alice Lucy Esselmont. She was born Alice Lucy Taylor. She was born around 1878 in Geelong. To William Henry Taylor and his wife Joanna. He married James Esselmont in New Zealand in 1914. So after that, they soon came over here because she was working around Prahran. She died in Coburg in 1956, and her son, also named James, was a chemist. So it's really really interesting. Just from this side, you can kind of start to put together a life that this woman had. So we know, she was married in New Zealand. She had her own business. She was very industrious. She was obviously able to support a family. She had a son. Her son went to school, was a chemist. So there you go. How are we doing for time? We good?
5 more minutes.
5 more minutes. All right, I'll rush this one. All right, table talk biscuits. You guys have probably all seen this. If you've been to, I saw it again tonight, looking again very ghostly in the dark and the rain and everything. So, this is from an advertisement in 1921. Those who make a point of obtaining the daintiest and most wholesome table biscuits will be pleased to know that Mr. Q. Yennick, an enterprising bohemian who was for 22 years with Messrs. Swallow and Ariel, who also made biscuits, South-Melbourne, has recently joined forces with the firm of Johann Plisch and Company, who owned this here, and is placing upon the market a delicious assortment of biscuits, biscuit confections under the trademark of Table Talk Dainties. These biscuits have distinctive shapes and flavorings and would be an acquisition to any luncheon or afternoon tea table. This fact is exemplified by a huge demand for Table Talk Dainties and all the houseboats at Henley on Saturday. Mr. Yennick is an artist as well as a confectioner and should not find any difficulty in placing his biscuits in every home in Australia. Someone wrote that. This was not an ad. This was actually like this was a piece of news at the time. So, man, I think news is crazy today. By the 1930s, they were the makers of Calypso creams, ginger nuts, coffee sticks, and mint creams. So, yeah. Prahran back in the day was a hub for bakeries back in the 1930s and up through the 1990s, actually. So, besides Table Talk biscuits, there was Capital Bakery, there were Golden Crumpets, there were Gowett's Bread and Sutherland's Bakery, and these were all, the area was just full of factories churning out baked goods for Victoria and beyond. Table Talk was actually kind of their big claim to fame was they were the first ones to use cellophane. So they had just an army of people. They also were known for hiring a lot of women, which at the time was pretty progressive. So they would be sitting there at tables, taking their biscuits, hand wrapping them in cellophane, putting them in the tins and everything. So they also contributed a lot to the local economy. Unfortunately, post-World War II, 1950s, someone invented a machine that did the cellophane wrapping, and a lot of people lost their jobs. So, of course, as a business, you don't want that to look bad. So in 1952, they advertised, "New machine-wrapped half-pound cellophane packets of Table Talk biscuits are here. They're convenient and retain their original fresh crispness. Ask your grocer. Easy to see why they're fresh." So, never they miss an opportunity to advertise to people, right? In 1990, the company was bought out by a New South Wales company. Table Talk's not really around anymore. The factory, the building's been turned into apartments. If you take a walk around from the platform and kind of walk around the block, you can still see the outside of the factory is in really good shape. So it still looks quite a bit like it would have. Not super remarkable. This is really the only ghost sign here. You can kind of see. Try to get a picture. This one on the side is super difficult. I was taking some photos of it today. Yeah, it just says Table Talk Biscuits Pty Ltd. That is it. Whew. You sat there. You made it. All right.
Questions, comments? Presumably you also record a sign that suddenly appears because there was, the building was, and then it'll get covered up again.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just actually a few months ago in Coburg, I think they knocked down a building and it kind of revealed this really beautiful, it's just the bottom half of a bushel sign. And it's really great because as soon as that happened, I must have gotten 5 different messages saying, "Oh my God, they just revealed the sign, no, you should go see it." So I went out there and I took pictures and I got a lot of really great pictures and everything.
It's not tagged now.
Yeah, and just a couple days after I was there, it was just completely obliterated and graffitied over, so it's completely gone. But I try to get these things. Yeah. Well, sometimes I know another one in Collingwood. They tore down. They kept the front, so the front of this building is still there, but they tore down the side and the back. The entire back is gone. It was all dirt. And when you walked around the back, you could see this big, beautiful sign for Dr. Morris's Indian root pills, which is, so I just kind of walked back there and, as long as you're not trespassing, it's fine. So I was back there taking pictures of that and everything. But yeah, I think now you can't see the sign now because they've basically built up around it and everything. But yeah, things appear and disappear. Yeah.
Have you done doing or are going to do a PhD on the subject?
Not the time. Right now, it's just a hobby. So I do spend quite a lot of time on doing this. So but, you know, I try to integrate it with other things. So if I know I'm going to go out somewhere, I might go an hour or two early so I can walk around and look at things, and then be up with friends. Or if I don't have anything going on, it's really nice, especially when the weather's nice. I'll jump on my bicycle and go out. So I really try to get exercise and do a lot with it. But yeah, no, I'm just doing it. I'm not monetizing at all. That's the other thing. So a lot of people who have a large following, they'll try to find a way to monetize. Not to say that I don't want to, because I would love to be independently wealthy. If I was, I'd be able to do so much more with it. But yeah, for right now, yeah, it's just a hobby.
Yeah, I'm taken by the fact that none of these signs are heritage listed or anything, and those three that we named are, kind of almost world famous. Have you ever thought of trying to do some action around that?
Yeah, well, so I've actually worked with the Victorian Historical.
Royal Historical Society of Victoria.
Yeah, the Historical Society of Victoria. Thank you. And I haven't done anything to save any signs. It's very difficult, but I did work with them. I know at one point, Robert T. So for those of you who don't know, Robert T. is my favorite ghost sign. This is an actual sign. It's on Lygon Street. So the Robert T. House. So Robert T. was created in the 1880s in south-ish Melbourne. It was around up until the 1970s, 1980s. Still a lot of Robert T. signs around. The Robert T. House is one of the only old brick factories still in Southport. It's basically everything that's not the casino. It's like this, There were plans to kind of tear most of it down and turn it into a tower. And I know, I worked with them to kind of, how do we save it? So we were going to have to do. I put a plan together. They were really great, but it just turned out that some strong-worded letters saved it, which is great. But yeah, trying to save these signs would be great, but I would even have to stop and think which ones. There's just so many around, and we're actually just really lucky that people have left them where they are. So yeah.
For me, I was fascinated from that perspective, but all these signs are slowly disappearing, and you probably have the best opportunity to be able to catalogue these signs and where they are, where they sit, and provide this type of history. Is that an online thing that's available, or is it a type of book that may be coming in the future?
Sure. Well, so first of all, it is all on, all of these stories for the most part are on my Instagram. So I post quite a lot. I usually post 2 or 3 times a week, sometimes 4. I try not to overload people with it. So they are digitally, they're out there. They're on Instagram. I do have a book publisher. I'm working on a book, so there will be at least one book. But there's so many signs. I literally, as I was going through and figuring out which ones I wanted to put in there, I was like, I want all these, and then I had 600, and I could only do 180 or something like that. So yeah, at this point, some of them, will be in a book at some point. So yeah. But yeah, I've reached out to the Historical Society to ask about, if they want some of these things in the catalog. Again, that would be something that I probably wouldn't get paid for. I'd have to find the time to do that as well. But yeah, I do think it's important, and I'm not trying to hoard it for sure. I like sharing it with people. So.
You mentioned Melbourne and surrounds. Do you do anything in the country? Because the country towns, I'm sure you've all been to, have got some fabulous ghost signs.
I do, yes. Yeah, so the beginning of this year, I got a car, finally, after living here for 7.5 years, and it's an old beat-up car that gets me from A to B, and sometimes to C. But yeah, I've started going out to these small towns, and just doing day trips. I'll drive out, literally just walk around, and find so if you go on my Instagram, I post things, I think even, my last one was from Country Victoria, so Yeah, Ballarat, they do. Yeah, still a lot to see. And thing is, people will send me signs from all around Victoria, which is great. And they'll say, hey, this is in Shepparton, or this is in Malden, or this is in Chilton, or this is in, and I have my Google Maps, if I were to show you, is like, it's just a sea of green dots of all the places around Victoria that I'm like, I need to get there, and I need to find that one day. Okay. So sometimes when I do have time, I'll just say, this town, that's doable, let's go out there, and I'll go out.
So if you see any, you know where to
Yes.
send them.
Honestly, yeah, I love getting it. Even if it's a sign that I have posted before, people are like, oh, I'm sorry if you've seen this. And I'm always like, don't say sorry. I love when someone is like, one, they noticed the sign, they had their own picture of the sign, and then they thought enough to send it to me, which is really flattering. So, yeah, it's great.
Thanks so much for sharing your passions and amazing. I was curious if you learned anything about the artists themselves that are painting signs.
Yeah, I haven't learned a lot, to be honest with you. It's actually kind of interesting though that like certain signs, I will see the same names on. Robert T is a great example. There's a couple of different Robert T signs, and a man named Taylor has written them. And then he'll have his name. So, yeah.
Another question.
Yeah, I was just going to say I'm actually a sign writer, and that's why I'm sort of
Excellent.
following all of this and sort of network through the history of where I've worked in my apprenticeship. So there's a few networks on Facebook, etc., where we can probably collab a bit and dig down to some of these people. There's some really good sign writers that are been around for many years and generational. So might reach out to you after this and yeah.
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
That's the fascinating part to me. And I love the fact that everyone's here looking at the history, whereas I see it from a trade perspective, and I look at the letter styles and the fact that it's hanging in there, and yeah, it's just another angle, so it helps build a bigger picture. So
Yeah.
what you're doing.
That's awesome. No, absolutely. And I think it's kind of a lost art form. And I actually follow a lot of sign writers on my Instagram because I love seeing, that's still alive and well. And I'll walk past, new businesses who are still utilizing the hand-painted signs on the glass and everything. It just, it's just amazing.
Just recently, a few years back, we did the Squires, James Squires at Wheelers Hill.
Yeah.
And I organised that particular job. We got sign writers in to make it look like it was 100-year-old sign writing in there, so that there's a lot of sort of distressed sign writing.
Yeah.
It's definitely really interesting these days. So.
Yeah, no, I think that's kind of the power of the internet, and I think it can be very easy to be negative. I've been there, but yeah, you're able to share things and like have these resources. Then you start connecting with other people who are like, oh, you're a sign writer. Oh, I'm into this, and yeah, I just think there's a lot of that around, and I think that's kind of the other interesting thing about my Instagram. It's kind of become a community. Like a lot of people. They'll comment. I recognize a lot of the people, if not by face, by name. Some of you might be here. I'm sorry if I don't know. But yeah, I just think it's such an interesting thing that the community is able to kind of use it as a resource or something that like sparks nostalgia or memory and everything. And that's the thing. Like I went up to Chilton a while back. It's kind of a tangent, I'm sorry, but I went up to Chilton a while back, and I was invited. They asked me to actually take some photos of their signs and do some history research. It was kind of as a come to Chilton type thing. And I went up there, and I actually loved the town. The town was really great. The people were really nice. But I got a tour of Dow's pharmacy. So if you've not been up there, absolutely go up to Chilton and check out Dow's pharmacy, because it's basically this woman. She was a chemist, which was kind of rare in and of itself, and her and her partner ran this chemist for about 40 years. He died in like the 1960s, and she just couldn't go on. So one day she left, locked the door, and that was it. And she just sat there until the 1990s, and she donated it to the National Trust. And when you go in there, sometimes you go to some of these museums or these tours and things, and it's a building that they brought in furniture of the era or things of. This is stuff that has been there. Some of it was in there from the 1880s. Like she had just had everything, and it's literally like stepping back in time, like nothing I've ever seen. The point of this long-winded story is that the person who gave me the tour was a man in his late 80s who was still all there, and he just gave a great tour. But yes, my whole thing was, who's gonna know all this when you're gone? Like, do you have an apprentice or anything like that? And he didn't. But I think since then they've done some recordings of him for the National Trust, so they do have that knowledge. But yeah, it's easy for that knowledge to get lost. All the stuff that I'm telling you are all things that I've culled from newspapers. Sometimes someone will message me and say, "Oh, this was my grandfather, and let me tell you this thing." And so that's really, really special that someone's able to share that. I like to share with other people as well. But yeah, these stories get lost to time. Some of them probably haven't been told in 100 years.
Sean, I think everybody here, I'm sure I speak on behalf of all of you, love this presentation, the images and your stories and the depth of your research. And it's been a great way to be transported to the past in such an interesting and engaging and entertaining way. Would you agree? So thank you very much. A small gift to give to Sean. There's still tea and coffee and things there and biscuits if you'd like to have some more. I'm sure you might be